All right, well, welcome everybody to this month's Flourishing by Design call. It is June, which I find shocking every day to think about, but yeah, so it's really nice to see you all here. This month we are going to be doing PechaKucha today. So this is our second PechaKucha. It's the quarter 2 version, since the first one was something that people really found to be interesting and wanted to repeat. So we're going to do that today. We have 5 speakers with us, so looking forward to that. We'll be doing this again in September and then perhaps in December, depending upon whether we have a meeting then or not. But welcome, everybody. So, as usual, I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of the traditional owners. The Flourishing by Design community acknowledges the Wurundjeri as the First Nation owners of the lands where FxD began. We pay respect to their elders, lores, customs, and creation spirits. We recognize that these lands have always been places of flourishing exploration through and by design, and that these lands were never ceded. Now, just as an announcement, last month we did not get to have a live meeting for a variety of reasons, primarily because I was traveling a lot and just didn't have a chance to actually get it scheduled and done in the way that we had originally intended. So we did a backup plan, and I spoke with 𝐐𝐮𝐤-𝐟𝐵𝐬, who was the former director of the Helen Hamlin Center for Design by the Royal College of Art in London. And we had been wanting to talk to him for a while, and we went back and forth on how we were going to do it. And we ended up doing kind of a mishmash of a variety of formats. So Rama and I spoke. He did a presentation. He talked a little bit about a new book on creative leadership that he had recently come out, as well as some new appointment and roles that he's taking on. And we just had a conversation after that. So if you want to take a look at that, I posted that on YouTube earlier this week, and you can watch that slightly over 1 hour session there. So really enjoy speaking with Rama. And today we're here for PechaKucha. We have 5 brilliant speakers, really excited to hear from. So we have Menno, then Arkantia, then Andrew, and then we have Katri and Samuel. So we'll be going in that order as we go. And without further ado, I will stop my share and allow Menno to begin. And I do want to announce that we have Amy Loftman too, who's going to be joining us from University of Melbourne. She's helping with facilitating Q&A today and then for some of our future sessions. So really appreciate having her here for that as well. And Menno, whenever you'd like to begin, the floor is yours.
All right, by sharing my unmute, moved to my other screen, but here we are. Thank you so much. So let me start my timer. There we go. I want to take a moment to think about where we as a species come from. What is natural to us? Who are we within our environment? And what is the human natural habitat? When a beaver built a dam, it's a natural marvel. Yet when we build a dam, we're destroying nature. The world around us is all man-made, square, bleak boxes. A world focused on function and not on the user, focused on efficiency, not on experience. The products and services around us are changing, and they're starting to respond. They're starting to interact with the human, act, react, predict behavior, and influence the outcome, influence experience. An era of agents. Today, we're not bound anymore by the old-fashioned architectural practices and limitations of the technological power that we had before. We can now create and design any space we want, any shape we want, and anything we could want. Technology will keep on pushing further, harder, and faster than any of us know. Alternate realities, mixed realities, even liquid glass. A true hybrid of online, offline, blended beyond recognition. Technology is evolving faster than us. How will we keep up? We can measure more and more what is happening in this gray blob of ours. What makes us happy, what makes us buy, what makes us flourish. The brain of ours is what drives us, yet it is still so hidden. AI is here, whether you like it or not. It's irrelevant in this case. Our design practice will have to evolve. This counts for digital design as much as physical design. Our buildings and cities will have to change. And most of all, we have to change how we will interact with these cities. We need to change the experience. However, there are still some architects that are trying to connect, trying to find this sense of awe. What makes us silent? What makes us present? What makes us connect in this loud world? A silent listening to an unspoken set of patterns. Everything around us is by the brain. Everything is consumed by the brain. We understand and interact through our brain, and with our brain, we wouldn't even know we would be alive, nor would we be. Funnily enough, we think and interact in this world through our emotions. We experience happiness and joy. However, we often feel emotions like stress caused by pressure or anxiety. The world around us doesn't feel very healthy. Maybe society as a whole is at the brink of a burnout. Stress, however, is actually a healthy thing. Stress helps us outrun the lion. That little bit of cortisol doesn't do any harm. It helps prepare our body for challenges and perform above average. Stress equals peak performance. But we have made it into a bad thing. We've made it into a paralyzing anchor pulling us down. Our body interacts with the environment in many different ways, through senses, maybe all 20 of them. But also our body is directly connected and tuned to the outer world. We act, we feel, we are a biological machine. This machine, however, is driven by experiences. We don't listen to design. We do what we want. Mind over body, no matter what. Our cities are networks of stimuli, fabrics of emotional triggers wanting to receive you. We can measure these, plan these, build these, avoid these, consume these. But maybe design isn't what we need. Maybe we need actors. Maybe we need cities of play, cities as a stage for life, and then let life live itself. We act predictably. We can map our movements, predict where we go, bouncing between urban magnets, like rats in a maze. Maybe all we are biological machines destined to bounce between A and B. Our environments impact us, like Levi and Zhu proved in 2008 that the ceiling height is directly related to our cognitive abilities, how we think, how creative we are, how this gray blob of ours function is directly tied to the spaces we inhabit. So let me end with two projects I've worked on. Maybe what we need are calm spaces, spaces that heal, spaces that stimulate our senses without forcing us down a certain path. Maybe we need spaces that allow the brain to brain. Maybe what we need is more connection to nature. Maybe what we need is more light. We need to accept that the built environment is just reshuffled pieces of nature, and to all intent and purpose, so are we. We need spaces for us as humans, simple yet complex biological, mental, and spiritual beings. Spaces for the brain, spaces for the soul, a new type of brain-healthy spaces to allow us to flourish, spaces that allow us to be human. Thank you.
Lovely and poetic. Would anyone like to pose a question to Menno, or a comment or reaction at all? Not sure that I'm seeing everybody, but really happy to open the floor up to anyone who has anything to say. Got a couple of claps. I think we're all still just digesting.
Katri, did you have something you wanted to say? I think I saw a hand raised. Oh, just clapping. Okay. I had one question. So, Menno, I noticed that you referenced Myers-Leavy and the ceiling height, and I don't
Yes.
oftentimes hear that study referenced. And ironically, that was one that I first came upon when I decided to transition from consulting into more architectural work. Is that one that you see cited in many places, or are there other
I
ones
sadly
instead?
don't. No, I sadly don't see it cited enough. I think when I did my PhD in 2010, I came across it when I did my review then. And I was really surprised that it's not picked up more nor referenced more. But there are more and more papers like from Delani and others that are really into the healthcare space. And I guess these
Yeah.
are picked up a bit more and they're shared more across the field.
Mm.
But I love to see more hardcore neuroscience psychology references floating into the design world. So if we can all get that together done, that would be a great win for all for everyone.
Mm. Exactly. Yeah, I think it's really interesting with her in particular, Joan Myers-Livy, who I believe is still at University of Minnesota, but she bridged, I think, even retail and business. So she was applying that in retail environments and even within banks and understanding how that impacted consumer behavior. So yeah, really excited to see that. Thank you.
And are we moving on after one question? Because there is a question in the chat. Should we hold that to the end if there's time? What do you think?
Yeah, let's hold that if that's all right.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, Menno, so you can prepare for that one for later. Hopefully we'll have time. And
Thank you.
Arkantia, do you want to go ahead and get going?
Sure. I think, thank you very much, Mano, as well. It's going to flow very well into the things that I want to talk about because I am speaking about design as well. And the way that we bring things like neuroscience, behavioral science into that. So I will be speaking about architecture that listens and what architects can learn from behavioral science. The presentation is mainly addressing kind of other designers from the perspective of a researcher in behavioral science, but I will keep it fairly high level to the degree that I can. And I will start with a question. Have you ever noticed how in clear desk policy offices, many people still end up claiming their space? The space was designed for flexibility, and that doesn't really suit everybody. So people improvise. They come in early, they leave belongings in specific areas, and that's behavioral design in action, even when it's unintentional. So most design tends to adhere to functions and floor areas, but human behavior really doesn't follow lines on a plan. Good design really creates dialogue with feelings, habits, and actions. And I think many of us are great at designing to code, but we don't always have the bandwidth to create environments for people, which is a very big challenge in practice. The thing with that is people don't experience buildings in the way that we draw them. They experience flows, interruptions, tensions, and rituals. And design that ignores behavior often gets ignored in return. That's where behavioral science really becomes essential in understanding and defending what works when it comes to practice in itself. The issue with that, though, is that behavioral science, similar to neuroscience, can seem academic or inaccessible, like it belongs in journals rather than studios. But it's really just another way of noticing why people do what they do, what design has to do with that. In its research form, obviously, it includes a lot of robust methodologies. But where you're looking at its application, it all starts with curiosity, observing patterns, asking why, using evidence not really as a constraint, but as a tool for discovery and understanding. So you don't really need to be an expert to start applying behavioral insight into your design process. And I want to talk about a few ideas that you can start considering and incorporating into the design process and your approach. So firstly, convenience. People tend to gravitate to what is easy, at the nearest exits, the closest desks, more familiar routes. When convenience shapes behavior, smart design really removes friction and meets people where they're already at, rather than forcing them to do something that feels unnatural to them. Then there is other aspects of the way that we approach the world that have to do with territoriality, and I'm very much laughing about that because people claim space, and even in flexible environments where there is a design that really avoids ownership emerges. I fall into that pattern. This meeting room that I'm in is actually what my mentor calls my office because I tend to be here very, very often. So it is something that really brings people in and helps them feel natural in the way that they are. And finally, legibility. When people have to ask, can I go this way? There is a sign there. Good design feels obvious, and legible spaces don't necessarily need signs. So when they're unclear, people become hesitant or avoidant in using them. So as a bottom line, the best behavioral design is often invisible. No one notices the white threshold, but everybody flows through. And that's the goal, design that quietly supports the use without really drawing attention to itself. And in order to do that, very small changes have outsized impact. A desk rotated, a door widened, a window seat that is added. These shifts aren't really dramatic, but they shape patterns, movements, and mood from a place of deep understanding of people. And I have a specialism in workplace design as a practitioner. There is a common example that I'm going to look into here around commercial offices. We design quiet zones for people. Sometimes they go unused, and that is because people tend to avoid it. It looks private, it feels exposed. The behavior shows us that the label doesn't match the experience. So what do you actually do in that case? Well, the first thing that you need to do is drop the labels. Calling something a specific thing doesn't really make it as such. Observe where people go when they need to focus, ask them what makes space undesirable or what they prefer, and then take action. Add separation layers, rearrange furniture or layout to support the function. Continue observing and adjusting as the patterns emerge. Which actually brings me to another point after this, that's a common misconception is that behavioral design is about dictating behavior, but it isn't about manipulation. It's not really about nudging people into compliance. It's about alignment, designing spaces that work with people, not against them, and rarely on them unless something very specific needs to change. And as designers, we often fall into a very common trap of designing for ideal behavior instead of probable behavior. That's how bike racks end up unused and breakout spaces become ghost towns. People adapt the design that we produce should do, because project completion is not really the end of design. And in that sense, for me, post-occupancy evaluation isn't just feedback, it's field research. We get to see the difference between how a space was intended to work and how it's actually lived in. And there is so much that we can learn from that, especially as practitioners, because we see that every day. Of course, there is a lot of research out there that we can draw from and inform design, both from academia and from practice. There is design guidance, blogs, books, standards, peer reviews, research in people environment studies across fields that has been produced over years and years of study. And that is an amazing thing, and we can all draw from that. But you also don't need empirical data to do behavioral design. You already have skills, observation, listening, and shadowing. So that's the starting point, but it requires a shift in mindset. Don't just ask, what should I design here? Ask, what will people probably do here? And that changes the perspective to the end user, which is the first step in really bringing all of that rigorous understanding into the design process itself. So some closing thoughts. Behavioral design isn't really disruptive. It's quite consistent and deeply human. It's about designing with people and with a deep understanding of them, not just for them. And that ultimately is what good design has always been about. Thank you for listening. And I have left a little bit of an introduction for the end of the presentation. My name is 𝐼𝐻𝐤𝐼. I am a chartered architect and behavioral design researcher working for 𝐏𝐞𝐜𝐤-𝐟𝐨 in Manchester, UK. I work in the intersection of architecture and psychology, integrating behavioral insight into how we design schools, workplaces, and civic spaces. And I joined Flourishing by Design to meet like-minded people, share knowledge and experience, and learn from others. So very nice to meet you all. And again, thank you very much for this.
Contia, that was lovely. I love that phrase, POE as field research. Great. Oh, we've got a question, a quick jump-in question from Andrew. Lovely. You want to just unmute Andrew and go for it?
Yeah, I'll say it. As soon as you had the clear desk policy, I was like, oh my God, yes, such a great example. It's such a great example because there's tensions. So yet the individual might want their space, their nest, but the organization's like, I have too many individuals. I need more space. Like it's the only. So how do you navigate those tensions, especially when like the people who are hiring you are ultimately the ones often who are the ones who have power over the people that you're supposed to be designing for? Like, how do you navigate that tension as a designer?
It's incredibly hard because we usually work with the high-level people that make the corporate decisions, especially in workplace as a sector. It's incredibly difficult. We have, as a company, a human-centered design approach that really pushes for bringing in surveys, engaging end users in a way that really, in some way, bypasses that standard approach, and that really helps quite a lot. So the short answer is by listening, but the access to listening is a very difficult thing. And I think it's what I'm calling for, a change in the way that we practice, because it's very hard to design for people when you're 3 steps removed from them. So we do it, but I think the industry needs to change a lot more. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
I don't think so. Yeah, maybe we go ahead and segue over to Andrew, because Andrew is our next speaker anyway, so that works out quite nicely. Thank you for that beautiful presentation, 𝐏𝐞𝐜.
It's quite possible that like many of our presentations are going to be liked, but I'll try to take it from a similar and slightly different angle. So, hi. I think Bruce Mao probably said it best. Everything we cannot see is where most of the action is. And that's as true in theater, where I started my career, as in the systems we design at work, which is actually what I do now. The most meaningful experiences are created in mostly invisible ways. Like when we go to the theater, we see the actors performing a play. At its best, it moves us, sometimes it even transports us, but how does that happen? The magic isn't just on the stage, it's the result of careful, intentional design that most of us never even notice. Behind the scenes, a director has shaped what's called the mise en scène, the interpretation of the script, how actors move around, how lighting and sound create mood, even how the venue supports the experience. But most of this is completely invisible. But it's what makes the magic of theater actually happen. Workplaces are no different. We often focus on the visible things, things like pay or title or perks, but the employee experience is shaped by all sorts of invisible design choices, policies, feedback systems, leadership behaviors, cultural signals. What are we designing, whether intentionally or not, behind that curtain? Because just as a play depends on its mise en scène, every job depends on the invisible forces that shape it. Policies, power structures, cultural norms, they all act like backstage cues. They create the lived experience of work, even if we never consciously see them. We could pick any moment that matters throughout the employee experience here, but let's zoom in on one scene, the performance review. It's maybe designed with good intentions, but it's often experienced with dread. Why? Because of all of the invisible design choices that can make it feel stilted, unsafe, and disempowering. On the surface, we see the performance review as a conversation, the form, the bonus, the rating, but that's just the visible performance layer, a kind of stage show that ultimately masks deeper dynamics. It's not designed for authentic growth. It's designed for control. What we don't see is the psychology beneath the process, the behavioral belief that people need carrots and sticks to perform. That is the assumption that's baked into the system level. And it often leads to behavior we don't intend. Invisible design has really real consequences. Performance reviews are designed to fit a bell curve. A few win, some lose, most stagnate. It's not about individual potential. It's about managing expectations and costs. That's a design choice, not a necessity. And it's one that we could change. Why do we design it this way? For the CFO, it helps us forecast. It helps shareholders feel safe. But does it help an employee flourish? When financial risk is prioritized over human experience, we may be reinforcing the wrong outcomes, and we're doing that by design. The systems we work within weren't built to help us thrive. They were built for efficiency, for risk control, for standardization. Those are the invisible design choices. And unless we redesign those structures, human-centered values will always be fighting an uphill battle. If we design for flourishing instead of compliance, what would that look like? If we trusted that people actually wanted to do meaningful work, we could shift from controlling performance to cultivating excellence, to helping people grow toward their highest potential. And we could do so by design. The science itself is clear. If we want sustainable performance, we need to help people live into core eudaimonic needs, things like autonomy by choosing their own adventure, belonging because other people always matter to our well-being, and mastery by finding people find ways to help them learn and grow. We can design for these things and flourishing follows. So like what if the performance review was redesigned to build trust and not fear, to deepen relationships, not transactional accountability, to support growth, not simply assign a rating. These are choices we can make. And starting with how we design each one of those moments can make a huge difference. A well-designed performance conversation can be an opportunity to spot strengths, to fuel progress. It doesn't have to be about judgment. Imagine reviews where people explored courage and honesty, humility, compassion, curiosity, creativity, respect, wisdom. These are the kinds of things that flourishing looks like in practice. When we help people shape the conversation, feedback itself can become a source of energy, not dread. Co-creation can build ownership of that process, trust and alignment. We need to design with and not for employees because flourishing is not delivered, it's co-created. Researchers and practitioners are showing us there is a better way. For example, the Freedom to Flourish Manifesto, through the leadership of Antoinette Weibel and colleagues, points towards human-centric design of experience, purpose over compliance, systems that support growth. The research and tools exist. Now we have to choose to use them, and we have to do so intentionally, because every design choice is ultimately political. Every policy reflects what and who we value. Design is never neutral. It carries assumptions about power, worth, and possibility. And we need to design with care and with awareness of our choices. And it all begins with belief. If we believe that people matter, that they can grow, that they can contribute meaningfully, we will fundamentally design differently. Each of us is a mighty oak in the making, as Aristotle would have said. We need to create the conditions for that growth. Once you see the invisible architecture of design, you can't unsee it. And just like in theater, what happens behind the curtain shapes what the audience experiences. And the organizations that we help shape, how are we redesigning for flourishing? I think that's it.
I really love that. Using theatre or an art form as a frame for everything else you speak about. What a nice way to put it. We have a question from Menno, I believe. You want to jump in and unmute yourself and jump in.
So I love this example. Also, I'm right now with my team in the end of year evaluation, so this really hits the mark. Just to play devil's advocate, you're kind of bashing the corporate structure for designing it the wrong way, or not bashing, but you understand what I mean. But can't that be interpreted as flourishing design for the company rather than flourishing design for individuals? Instead of saying it was done the wrong way, maybe it was done for the wrong cause?
Yes, I completely agree. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily done the wrong way. I'm saying it's done to prioritize financial reasons over human reasons, I guess. And
Which is the reason companies exist, no? Most of them. But
I mean,
maybe that's another statement for another day.
I mean that's arguable, right? Like, I mean, the difference between shareholder versus stakeholder, mentality it doesn't need to be that way. We don't have that. Yes, there's lots of reasons why companies could exist. But yes, fundamental assumption. Yes.
I feel like this could be a much longer discussion, but we are limited to one question, aren't we, Jenna? Who's next?
For now, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Yeah, next is Katri, so I'll go ahead and change the pins around.
Yeah.
And pin her. Go ahead.
Katri Hernandez, young architecture and research at the University of Monterrey. and the Autonomous University of Nuevo León in Mexico. In this presentation, I explore how the built environment influences our body emotions and potentially help the future generations. This boson is defined as a totally external factor acting of the genome through our times, include three interconnect domains: the specific external, internal, and the general external exposure. As Millie-Harjon out is know about exposure, how our body interacts with it. And this way we don't not only inhabit architecture also inhabit us. Each everyday space, whether in the home, the place, or the city, adds a front environment exposure. Epigenetics is the study in heritable changes in gene expression that do not alter DNA sequence but can trigger by physical, social, and chemical environments. And these mechanisms show how the spaces we have in can influence or violate potential the health of the future generation. The built environment shapes how they feel on the fusion. Architecture not only material, it also includes symbolic and sensory dimensions. The influence health of the precision. Habitats should be beyond providing shelter, the most sport will within adapting and long term. The body interacts with the space through the sense, light, sound, temperature, odors, and the materials, trigger a physiological response that affect the nervous, endocrine, immune system. This exposure can disrupt homeostasis, contribute to disease, helping understand how the environment influences health. For example, spaces with a natural light, good ventilation, thermal comfort, and not toxic materials help regulate the body and mind, natural tranquility and spatial harmony, promote rest and reduce stresses. Well, by contrast, poor design and deteriorate environments harm physical and mental health, overcrowding, humidity, pollutions, and not generate constant stress on the body. This condition alter the key biological function and they can trigger the epigenetics changes like two chronic diseases. The body main demonstrate how the activity respond on the environment. In general, repeated exposure can leave biological imprints known as epigenetic memory, which influence emotional, immune, and the metabolic function even across generations. Some life stages are more vulnerable to the environment. For example, during pregnancy, exposure at pollutants is associated with increased risk neurodevelopmental disorders. Beyond the sensitive stage, combination of everyday exposures, such as noise, toxin, lighting, or overcrowding, can produce biological effects. There is no has the cocktail effect, in which a smell, stressor, combine, sustain, and trigger epigenetic changes. Built on the previous idea, spatial design can support health and can trigger, will ensure comfort and sensory balance. It reduces stress at years recovery. Visible symptoms like fatigue, insomnia, or anxiety are often surface signs of deeper process shaped by the built environment. Even severe illness, including some cancers, may originate from environment exposures that remain unrecognized, especially in the deteriorated or hostile living space. Expanding this idea, heritage means more the receiving a space, including emotional environment conditions one lives there, which may leave in biological imprints affecting future generation even without direct connect. Despite its impact, architecture is often overlooked in public health. However, peers spaces we inhabit can support or disrupt essential biological function, including spatial conditionals in policies key. Beyond the home, the urban environment intensifies exposures, noise, pollution, lack of green space, and segregation at the housing border the exposure is not only personal, but only structural, collective, shaping urban health through complex community and exposures. Living with well-being means recognize that space is not neutral. Environment conditions shapes our body daily. When we understand architecture is part of the exposure and spatial sensory design becomes preventive strategy. What we consider normal precariousness, pollution, environmental distress shouldn't be accepted as inevitable. Recognize space has an active factor in health, call us to rethink how we design and inhabit. Thank you for listening. From Flourish by Design, I find my place at the intersection of architecture and salutogenesis through research and design. I foster well-being and contribute to the shared future, shape my care, integrity, and creative. Thank you once again for the opportunity to share part one research, and thank you so much.
Thank you, 𝐏𝐿. I feel like we went on a whole journey there. Lots of biological concepts in a speedy talk. Thanks for that. Does anyone want to jump in with a question or any discussion points? I love the reframing of inheriting a home as a potential mechanism of intergenerational transmission of something, as opposed to, a luxury or a privilege. It's so true that you can inherit more than you bargained for, or more than is necessarily beneficial for you, I suppose. It struck me that a lot of this relates to sort of the social determinants of health and how disadvantage has so many ways of impacting our health. And I wonder if any of you designers or architects in the room have a feeling of how your work interacts with that, especially in relation to what we just heard and how architecture can contribute to health. And sorry if I missed it, 𝐏𝐿, but are you a designer? Do you want to speak to that from your point of view?
I investigate that the design affect other generation, but I analyze why affect them, for example, accumulate in the housing. Is my specific area.
So on housing design in particular?
Excuse me?
On housing design in particular?
Yes. So the house needs some specific conditions, for example, the further temperature. So, for example, the tranquility. So it's when the spices in the home, it's changed their life. The person that have some illness.
Yeah, I see. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question, Amy. 𝐏𝐿, is it more residential? Do you normally focus on homes, or do you consider work and other types of buildings?
Specifically, residents.
Okay, so more residential.
Yes.
All right, very good. Well, thank you. Well, maybe we'll transition to our last speaker and then have a bit more time for a few other questions after Samuel's. But I'll go ahead and change the pins, and yeah, we'll go ahead and get Samuel next. Thank you. All right, Samuel, if you'd like to get ready, you should be able to share your screen now.
All right. The screen is on, right?
Good to see you. Yes, it's looking good. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So my name is 𝐐𝐮𝐤-𝐤. I'm an architect based in Nairobi, Kenya. I like to humbly call myself the senses architect, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. The presentation is already going, so it's divided into 4 parts. I'm going to talk about presence, absence, and the essence of our being, and we'll finish by talking about desensitizing ourselves. So this is absence. This is how most of us commute to work, in being overstimulated by sounds, by horns, and this is where we end up working in modern offices. Sleek, where we have focused on designing for efficiency, but forgotten to design for feeling. We've forgotten to design for flourishing. These spaces, they're designed for sight, but they forget to, they're not even designed with color, with warmth. And this is where most of our kids are left to grow up, where their senses are stimulated by pixels more than nature, and there is a sense of disembodiment, comparing that to those who are growing and they're exposed to trees. So one of my most absence experiences was when I came to the city and I woke up and it had rained. And I was like, I was not used to that, because in the village where I grew up, you will see the rain coming and you will prepare for that. And when it comes, you'll know that after the rains, we'll be out playing in the mud, getting to ground ourselves with nature, which is what I call presence, which is the sense of full sensory nourishment. And so to design for flourishing, we must design for all the senses. We must design for touch, because when you design for touch, we are not just touching the materials and feeling them. We are designing for connection. We are designing for memory. Touch is primal in us. In museums, they have those tags that please don't touch, because it's primal in us, it's inherent. And to design for flourishing, we must also design for light, not just light in the sense of informational, using light in that sense. Growing up in the village, we'll be woken up by light, which was not turned on by a switch. It was sun rays coming through the gaps in the walls. To design for flourishing, we must design for sound, not just sight. This is an ocean waves flowing away from a speedboat. It's by Anna Marinenko. And so when we design for sound, in the mainstream architecture, we're usually obsessed with getting rid of noises. We must design for sounds that heal, sounds that calm us. To design for flourishing and for presence, we must design for smell. This is an image of after rains. There's the smell of petrichor. It's a smell that calms us and heals us. It is a show that the rain has touched the earth and there's a sign of life. And so this is that part of my presentation where we talk about the essence of our being. That the essence of our being is not that just we are occupants of spaces, that we are sensory beings. At the core of us, they say beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. But I say that beauty is in the senses of the beholder. And so where can we learn from these aspects? We can learn from nature, because nature, I like to say, is the ultimate multisensory design that didn't have architects, that didn't have engineers. The way dappled light falls through trees, the winds, the breezes, we need to learn from nature. We need to learn from animals. We share 96% of our DNA with him. And whatever he enjoys, if we were to bring him in our built environment, he won't enjoy the environment. And yet this is where we spend 90% of our time. We also need to learn from our ancestors. This is a Maasai Manyatta house. The way it is designed with natural materials, we may not see windows from here, but there's a way light flows through the thatch. There's a way light flows into the space. And our ancestors knew how to design. We need to also learn from how chefs create cuisines, the way they cook, the way they incorporate sounds, the way they incorporate good smells, and how the food not just nourishes our bodies, but nourishes our brain, nourishes our senses. And that's why I like to talk about senses as nourishing our senses. This is the last part where I'm going to talk about desensitizing our world. We must start by desensitizing our residential spaces. I like this image because being here, you're not just seeing the waterfall, you're also hearing the sounds. We must also resensitize our children, the environments they are growing in, the spaces that they're spending most of their time in, because those formative years, they are very important. And being in nature helps to not only grow their senses and grow their sensory muscles, but it's also good for their health. We must resensitize our senses. Resensitize our cities with textures, with smells, with sounds that heal us, that calm us, and not the overstimulation that we are used to. Finally, we must resensitize ourselves. This image shows us that we are part of nature. We are not separate from nature. And so we must go back to resensitize ourselves. And I'd like to finish by a small activity where I'm going to ask us to take a slow, deep breath in the environment that you're in, and close your eyes and ask yourselves, what is the smell of the space that you're in? How does that make you feel? What sounds, what noises can you hear? And how do they make you feel about your space? Are they the trademark of your space? Are there any taste sensations that your space gives you? Ultimately, how does the space make you feel? Because, as Peter Zumthor put it, presence is a gap in history when it is no longer past and it's not the future. It's just now. And for us to flourish, we must go back to designing for people to feel spaces. And that's why I'm part of this community, because I believe designing not just for form or function, but for feeling and for flourishing. What I like to call presence. In the slides, you may have seen how I try to edit presence to kind of include the sense bit so that we can design for presence and get out of absence. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel.
You're welcome.
As a psychologist into mindfulness, I also really agree with presence. I think it's very therapeutic. Contia has a question. Do you want to just unmute and have that discussion?
Yeah. So thank you very much for the presentation. Very interesting. And the reference you made to rain is actually something I can very much relate to. I come from an island in Greece. So when I came to the UK, one of the things that I noticed, and actually my friend who is from India has noticed the same thing, the smell of the rain in September time is not the same. So you don't get that connection to the environment, to that natural element. So I guess it's where my question is coming from. It feels like we have gone quite far from that direct connection. So how do you think we actually start to undo what we have done with our cities, what we have done with our environments at the moment? Because there's a lot of concrete here, there's a lot of brick, not enough green.
I think what I can say is just the way I finished the presentation, that we have to, first of all, resensitize ourselves. We have to reawaken our senses as individuals, because some of us have been brought into these environments since we were kids. And so we even don't know what is presence. I can talk about the rain, or you can talk about it because you've had that experience before. There's some people who have never had that experience before. So to beginning, we must resensitize and reawaken our own senses. Other than that, I'm a big fan of biophilic design, because I believe with biophilic design at its core it is multisensory. And so with biophilic design starting to come into our residential spaces, into our offices, and now taking that debate into biophilic urbanism, where we are incorporating those principles in designing our urban spaces, and even that being taken further to be incorporated in our policies. I think that's where we need to go, and to just undo the damage that has already been done. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I often wonder whether all of this designing with nature, we could simplify it by just being in nature more. Right? Is it a design problem or a behavior problem, a lifestyle problem? Anyway, that's also a bigger question, just like what are companies for? Who are they for? Thanks, everyone. That was great. I'll hand over to you, Jenna.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for joining. It looks like we are at time, so rather than go over, I think we should probably just end it there. Really appreciate everybody joining us today and having our speakers in particular. It was really lovely to interact with you all in preparation for today and just getting the conversation going and seeing people's different but similar perspectives at the same time on flourishing. I think there are a lot of interesting synergies that hopefully we can explore together next time we meet in future meetings, but then also on the side if you guys want to connect more there. And we had some good chat conversation today too, so that was kind of fun to have play out. But yeah, thanks everybody for joining us this month. Hopefully things will be a little bit more unscheduled next month when I return to Australia. My 4 months of travel end next week, so things should be a little bit more normalized then. And actually, I will see Andrew in person in Brisbane for the Positive Psychology Conference. We're going to be talking about eudaimonia together. So yeah, curious to see how that goes and then share that with the community afterwards. But thanks everybody for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Have a
Thanks,
lovely
everyone.
day.